Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of the Purge 2 Anarchy. I just woke up and I am incredibly tired, so if I seem off throughout the duration of this video, deal with it. My feelings towards the first Purge weren't really any different from everybody else's, in that I thought it had a pretty cool, albeit faulty concept that unfortunately was wasted on a home invasion scenario. Now when it comes to the concept, the problem is once you think about it, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. They claim in the movie that, if you purge your murderous and violent tendencies on this one night, you're less likely to do it throughout the rest of the year. Therefore, crime is incredibly low. The problem is that most criminals are repeat offenders. So, obviously the movie doesn't really want us to think about that too hard. But at the same time, at least it is different. As somebody who's tired of seeing the same old shit over and over again, I do appreciate things that are unique, even if the uniqueness doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I could live with that. The problem is that the home invasion scenario is the total opposite of unique. Every single home invasion thriller seems to have the exact same conventions, cliches, characters, family dilemmas, thematic material. I mean, in all home invasion flicks, you have a dysfunctional family who has to unite in order to repel this invading menace. Or if they fail to do so, they're less likely to die, or they're less likely to survive by the end of the movie. It's like every director thinks that they're breaking new ground whenever they explore that idea, when it's been done in every other home invasion movie, and I am so sick and tired of I'm just sick and tired of that whole genre. I hate home invasion flicks, and the only time they end up being a little different is, when you go like the funny games route, and I hate funny games even more so than the majority of home invasion flicks out there. But I will concede, at least if there's a good home invasion flick, then it's good. If it was intense and I cared about what was happening, that would, overshadow the fact that I'm pretty much watching a remake of all the other home invasion flicks. So the fact that The Purge wasted such potential, because it was just the exact same kind of movie that all home invasion flicks. It had the exact same cliches, conventions, family dilemmas, and so on. The fact that it wasted that potential, though, has really overshadowed the fact that The Purge was pretty mediocre. It doesn't do anything horribly, but it doesn't really excel at anything either. So when people remember it, it'll just be that it had a cool idea, but it just wasted it on the home invasion home invasion scenario. So when they announced that they were going to make a sequel, I could care less. But then I saw the trailers, and actually I thought the trailers looked pretty good, because it seemed like they were doing more with the concept. It was not going to be another home invasion flick. It was going to take place on the streets, where the bulk of the action would take place, whereas in the first one they were like in a nice neighborhood, and it just happened that a homeless person stumbled in there. So you didn't really get to see a whole lot of the actual Purge. So that seemed cool, and the reviews, they weren't great, but they were better than what the first one got. So I started getting a little excited for this, and I watched it, and it's actually pretty decent. I don't want to say it's good. It's okay. I had fun with it, but at the same time, I will concede that it's kind of unremarkable. In regards to, once again, using the concept, it's primarily done to just set up the setting. This movie could not take place without the idea of the Purge. Otherwise, you'd have to get a whole different location. Part of the appeal is that it is just taking place in a neighborhood, in the streets of a neighborhood. There's so much mayhem going on all around them. That is how they use the concept, and I think that's for the best, because I remember when the first film came out and people were, criticizing the first movie for, how it underutilized the central idea, and they were giving all what they wanted to see out of it. And I was like, this is all interesting stuff, but I don't really think you should draw too much attention to the premise, because, like I said, it is very flawed, and it doesn't really hold up very well under logic. So if they had lingered on that too much, I think it would have just drew more attention to the flaws. But at the same time, I will concede that they give a good reason, or a better reason for the purge, in that, even though they say it's done to purge violent tendencies, there's a much more financial reason for it, so that I could buy a lot more. So that was good. But make no mistake, The Purge 2 is not an intelligent movie. It's just one action set piece, and then the characters get to the next action set piece. There is really no brain, as much as the film does try to preach to you. But I think really the best thing about it is Frank Grillo as the lead. Was his name Leo in the movie? Whatever his name was, he was very intense, captivating, charismatic. You paid attention to him no matter what he was doing, whether he was standing there, talking, fighting. He was just a total force to be reckoned with. And this movie does a good job at utilizing him, because he's not just, a straight-up badass. He gets to show off a variety of emotions, and I was totally with that character from beginning to the end. The supporting cast, they weren't as annoying as the characters from the previous film, but they're just kind of generic supporting characters. The acting was pretty good, at least. Although the acting was also pretty good in the first film, too. One thing I will say, I thought the first film did better than this one. One of the more interesting aspects of it was how the characters had a lot of moral dilemmas, to where, like, I would even be totally sure what I would do in that situation. Whereas here, the characters, they're much more standard. They don't really have to worry about that. They don't want to participate in the purge, and Frank Grillo's character is the only one who's really doing anything with it, and that's just to avenge his son. But still, this is such a different kind of movie that I don't really blame it for choosing to not go that route. It's also a very fast-paced film, and in fact, I can see an argument being made for it being too fast-paced to the point where it suffers from burnout. I never had that issue. Yeah, it definitely moves really quickly, perhaps even too quickly, but it seemed like it knew when to pause, give me a breather, and then move back to getting to the action. So I could see that complaint being made. I just don't really agree with it. The action scenes themselves are pretty standard. Just gunfights, simple hand fights, nothing really stood out as phenomenal. It's violent, but at the same time it's not violent to the point where the gore stands out either. Another valid complaint is that the film does take itself way too seriously, when it quite possibly should have gone a campier route like The Warriors. I'm split on that, because part of the fun for me was that it took itself so seriously, while at the same time it is really difficult to take seriously. When you see, like, the villains show up and they're just acting so over the top with their mannerisms and their almost artsy sounding dialogue, it made me laugh, and I think it might have lost its appeal if it was winking at the camera, if it knew it was being silly. But that's one of those things where you could either agree with me or you won't, and nothing will be lost. It really comes down to your taste and how you think you will respond to that. But I enjoyed the various scenarios that the characters found themselves in, like when they're in the tunnels and suddenly this person drives through with a flamethrower and they're burning all the homeless people, and they have to escape. That was pretty exciting. And the ending has this situation they find themselves in where they're almost participating in like a Hunger Games type event. It was really strange, but at the same time, I wouldn't have expected that. Even though you kind of see parts of it in the previews where they're setting up that game, I just figured it would be a straight up, they'd kill them. I didn't think they were going to put them in the freaking Hunger Games, but that kind of stuff, that kept my interest. But above everything, it was the pacing and Frank Grillo's performance that really was my anchor. Otherwise, The Purge 2 is pretty dumb. It's pretty, unexceptional. I don't think I'm going to remember much of this flick, but at the same time, I do feel more positive about it than I did its predecessor, which, once again, I thought was very mediocre. I thought this one was at least above average. So would I recommend it? I think it's a really good rental. I'm not sure if it's worth going to the theaters to see unless you were a really big fan of the first Purge. Now, if you did not like the first Purge and were planning on avoiding the sequel for that reason, well, I guess it depends on what part of the Purge you disliked. The premise, in which you probably won't care for this one either, or is it just the home invasion bit? Because this film has a total different formula from the first Purge. So it's really up to you, but I think that it's worth watching. Once it comes out on DVD, it's the type of film that when it gets released on Netflix, I'd probably bump it to the top of the list. But that is all I have to say. I did do a written review, so please read that. I've also done written reviews of I don't remember. Hostel 2, Daughter of Darkness, Forbidden City Cop, and my next one will probably be Hostel 3, so read all those. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter, especially if you want updates on Critiquing the Critics when I plan on releasing my next episode in text format. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys later.